Hi, I'm Antonio Mora. Winston Churchill popularized the saying that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Over the 72 years that have passed since he said that in Britain's House of Commons, history has repeatedly proven the truth of that aphorism. So, why are so many people across the globe dissatisfied with how democracy is working? First, there's no question democracy has become an increasingly common form of government over the past half-century. Take a look at this map from the Center for Systemic Peace's Polity 4 project. The light brown shows how most of the world was governed by autocracies in 1977. Now, look at the Polity Project's map for 2017. Light blue denotes democratic governments, and they now predominate. Countries in beige, which indicates mixed countries, ones that have elements of both democracy and autocracy, are the second most common. And as you can see, autocracies are now a small minority, and they are mostly in the middle and far east. One caveat: I think the Polity Project is overly generous when it comes to qualifying countries as mixed. Having the trappings of democracy means nothing if an autocratic ruler holds sway. At the end of 2017, Uganda and Sudan had leaders who had been in power for decades. They were autocracies. Russia under Putin? I'd go with autocracy. And Venezuela was deemed mixed too at a time when it was clear Nicolás Maduro had laid waste to what was left of the country's democratic institutions. I'd also question calling Egypt under El-Sisi mixed. The Economist's Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index is more stringent. Nearly a third of countries are deemed authoritarian, including those I just mentioned, except Uganda, which barely avoids that label. The index considers fewer than half the countries evaluated as democracies, and even then, most of those are deemed flawed. The Polity Project designated 57% of countries as democracies in 2017, including the overwhelming majority of countries in the Americas. That said, only about a quarter of countries were considered fully consolidated democracies. Still, democracy has grown across the world, especially since the end of the Cold War, even if progress has stalled since. In theory, the ideas underlying liberal democracies are popular around the world. But while the number of people living in countries that hold free and fair elections is close to the highest numbers ever, satisfaction with how democracy is working in practice isn't. In fact, the Pew Research Center surveyed more than 30,000 people in 27 countries on all continents and at all different levels of development. It found that 51% of people surveyed are dissatisfied with how democracy is working in their country. Only 45% are satisfied. That dissatisfaction with democracy grew almost everywhere. Only Australians and Israelis were more positive about their democratic governments than the year before. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason geographically. While people in Sweden and the Netherlands are among the most satisfied with democracy anywhere, other Europeans, especially the Greeks, Italians, and Spaniards, are among the least happy with it. People in Asian countries mostly approve of their democracies, but the Japanese, not so much. The three Latin American countries surveyed, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, are among the least satisfied. While Canadians are mostly satisfied with how democracy works there, the U.S. registered significantly below the average, with 58% dissatisfied and 40% satisfied. Obviously, there's plenty to complain about in U.S. politics, as our two-party system has led to gridlock in Washington and severe political and philosophical divisions across the country. However, the U.S. bucks one clear trend in the survey, which is that people who believe the economic situation in their countries is good are generally satisfied with how democracy is working. Not so here. Even though the U.S. economy, by most objective measures, is strong, Americans are still mostly unhappy with their government. The bottom line is that people who live in democratic countries are freer to speak their minds and shape their lives and those of their children. They are, on average, richer than people in non-democracies and are less likely to engage in wars. As a terrific essay in The Economist titled "What's Gone Wrong with Democracy" concludes, the fact that, quote, so many people in so many different parts of the world are prepared to risk so much for this idea is testimony to its enduring appeal. And if democracy is to remain successful, it argues, it must be both assiduously nurtured when it is young and carefully maintained when it is mature. So, complain about democracy as much as you want, but until you show me a better system, I'll agree with Winston that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others.